Welcome back to Undermine Season 4. I'm your host, Tom Marshall. And as we said in episode 1, which featured John Paluska, from now through December, we'll be tracking Phish's progression in the 1990s by focusing on 25 important shows of the 90s, all leading up to the tour that changed everything, fall of 1997. And we'll discuss every show of that particular tour. Our format this year is to do a brief dive into all these shows with the help of a co-host and with a special guest who is either at the show or can otherwise bring some knowledge about that era. And we're lucky to have, again, my co-host for today, Osiris co-founder and HF Pod host, RJB. Hello, RJ.
Hello, Tom. Good to be back again. Episode 1 was so much fun. And today we're going to be discussing one of the most famous Phish shows of all time, which is August 3rd, 1991 at Amy's Farm in Auburn, Maine. This 3-set show, it was free to attend. It's synonymous with early stages of Phish. And of course, we all had the tapes. And we thought who would be better to discuss this show with than the host of Amy's Farm, Amy Skelton. So we're going to bring her on in just one second. I just want to say, check us out on Apple. If you subscribe to Osiris Premium, it's $4.99 per month. You can get ad-free podcasts, bonus episodes, and more. So support us there and support independent podcasting. All right, Tom, do you want to tell us a little bit about Amy before we bring her on?
Sure. Well, the Osiris faithful have already heard Amy, I think twice. I think I had her on Under the Scales, and we probably had her on Undermine before. And we're really honored and happy to have her back. She needs no real introduction because she's been along literally since before there was a Phish. Every now and then the dude and I pat each other on the back that, yeah, we were here before there was a Phish. Well, Amy is in that club, and there's quite a few others that are still around and still consider themselves Phish fans, but Amy almost more than any of them. The early days, Amy hung around with John and Phish at the University of Vermont. And she remembers when Trey met Phish, and she hung out as they got to know each other, and eventually went to their practices and all their shows, and even when she was the only audience member. And I'd like to welcome Amy.
Amy, welcome.
There she is. Hi, Amy.
Hey, guys.
How are you?
Good to see you.
You're in Vermont at the moment, right?
I am.
No longer in Maine.
No longer in Maine. I moved back. I moved to Vermont permanently in 97.
Cool. Very cool.
Although it's not exactly true, because then I took 5 years. While the band was on hiatus, I had one of my own. I went to Nova Scotia for 5 years.
Oh, cool.
Those very same years.
That's awesome. Well, we're all lucky that you were in Maine when you were and had this amazing, beautiful farm that you had. One of the pretty much Phish's first festival, I guess, on it. Yeah. And so we're at least familiar with the early days when you knew, John and Trey at UVM, and you hung out with them as the band formed and became Phish. But that was in 83. And the show that we're talking about is 8 years later. And so in between then, what happened after college? The band had left University of Vermont and actually graduated from Goddard. Did you do the same?
I graduated same time in 87, and I was a horse person. So, all through college, I had a horse at school, and I rode and competed, and, I was pretty focused on having a stable of my own. And so I left college. I worked for a year. Well, I had started Amy's Farm in college. So I would go home in the summer, teach riding lessons, come back in the fall and go to school. So in 87, I graduated and then stuck around Vermont, New Hampshire for a year, and then went to horseshoeing school in 1988. So I could be a full service horse person. And right around that time, actually, I was running around with the white tape demo and the promo pack for Phish. And I had, I always had a couple of those in my car, and, those were always around. And the band had asked me right around somewhere in 88, whether I would manage. And I said, I can't really do that right now because I'm going to horseshoeing school in the fall. And so, so I think then that's when they asked Ben Hunter, and things moved on from there. But I went to horseshoeing school, and then I came back and I opened my farm. In 1989, I started my horse stable, and it was a 21 stall barn in Maine. And I taught riding lessons, and I boarded horses, and I had a stallion that I bred, and that was my gig. I worked at my farm.
So you people like me that remember some of the early shows, you were there, but that was not because you were working with the band yet, which you eventually did, but it was because you were just friends and you went to the Northeastern shows like I did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I kind of thought you had just sort of been absorbed by Phish immediately after school, but that's not quite the case.
No, but it did happen not too long, later. So in, 89, I'm fully immersed in the farm, and I would see shows when I could, but suddenly I was really sort of tied down by this business that I had started. It's a tough one to just close the doors and run off and see a bunch of shows. So I would only get to see like one or two at a time because I was burdened by this thing. When the band would come through Maine or anywhere in New England, I would see them. But that was getting to be a smaller number of shows because the band was starting to tour all over the place. But I'd catch, 3 or 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Then the band came in November. I think that was, they came through for Colby College, I think, and a couple of other shows, and came to my house after the show. I had mentioned that I had this field, and I think it would be cool, So they came and checked out the field the next day after the show, and I actually put everybody on horses, and we rode out there to check it out. Actually, that didn't happen until later. That was when we rode out there. So we rode out to the Phish field on horseback with a group of my friends from the farm or people that worked for me. And everybody's on horseback, and that all went really well. And we walked around the field, and then on the return trip, the horses, now headed for the barn, started to trot, and then they started to canter. Band can't ride very well. Now they're cantering, and then they're galloping. And Trey is actually riding Maggie, who is the horse that got hoisted. But Maggie, she's young and she's like full of, piss and vinegar, and starts walking. And anyway, they were like, I'm not allowing my horse to run ahead because, I could lead them to if I could cause a race. So I'm holding back and I'm saying, pull back. And thinking, holy crap, I got to kill them.
You're going to be the one that breaks Trey's hand,
right before, terrifying.
Right on tour. He was always so worried. I have stories of him thinking that I'm not treating his hands correctly.
Right.
And so I imagine that he probably had envisioned a spill from the horse. It's kind of funny because you see like when the band surveys like Big Cypress or, Loring Air Force Base or something like that. They always do it on ATV vehicles, but this was so far in the old days that it was horseback.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about, a year ago, they were in Colorado. We just had that talk with John. So a year later now, like you said, they kind of, they had come through Maine. They surveyed this place. What were they like? They're still in a van, right? They're still a small
yeah,
van.
At that point it was conversion vans. So they had, I can't remember if they'd graduated to 2 vans or 1, but they at least had the 1 van and the box truck. Was that Jemp at that point, or there was a prior box truck that was less good? I think they had the less good truck maybe.
Right.
And the conversion vans, right? So that's how they were touring. And then, I don't know if you want to talk about that, but they toured the field. We checked it out. We thought it would be a fun idea, sort of planted the seed, put it in the back of our minds. And I don't think it was until the spring when we kind of got more serious about it. They came through one more time and walked and talked in the spring in May after another show. And we walked the field that time safely. And looked at it again and talked really about, more about like what I would have to do to pull this thing off. And then we all decided it was a good idea. And I went and talked to the town and, tried to figure out what I had to do to make this go. And then eventually we, wrote that postcard and sent it out to the fans and did that. So I didn't work for them until the following spring, really was the beginning in spring of 92. Do you want to talk about that? Or do you want to go back to Amy's farm?
Yeah. I want to ask you, just when you're putting this together, just because you'd been connected with them so much earlier, and then you are still in touch and they come back, like, did they seem different as a band from the college days? Like, because I think now you see them on stage and you see them touring and they're so, like, clearly they're so well practiced and they're so focused and they're so, like, obsessive with how they do their thing. Like, I'm just wondering, did anything change between the college days and 91 when this came together, or were they still kind of like the same people you knew back in college? Because a lot had changed for them between that time.
I would say they've, it wasn't until, I don't think they've changed much as people at all. Like I think they are still, they're still true to their essential natures all the way back. Wouldn't you say so, Tom?
No question. Yeah. I mean, you can,
like, there's no change at all.
especially like John, when I hear him doing that silly intro, he's just like that still.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. They were definitely thinking more about, the direction of this thing and not necessarily strategy, but like what they were excited to do and places they were excited to play, and how they were excited to play, and thinking about the quality of the shows, because they could think about it. Like suddenly they could pick and choose instead of being just squashed into some bar. So they were thinking about that stuff, but no, I'd say their essential nature was just
the same. Yeah. You talked a little bit about going to town and possibly getting permits or whatever. To me, like, Vermont is almost like the South. Like, you don't really need permits, or you don't really need permission to do anything like this. I'm in New Jersey, the land of permits. Anything takes paperwork, but Vermont was a little bit more lax. But really, like how many people were you expecting? And do you have to have like mandatory bathrooms and parking? There's camping. That's complex. People need food. Like, how do you get that set up? Yeah.
Well, I looked at it like I'd been to certainly, camping music things. So I kind of knew what we were gonna experience. We did have some food there. There was a couple of trucks there that had food. But I knew that we would need water. And then when I went to the town, they said the same thing. You got to have potable water. And when they said potable, I was like, oh, right. Like, you can't just have water. There has to be like, a safe source. So that we brought in a big truck of potable water, like just a big tanker truck full of water. And they said there needed to be egress, like fire, like for a fire engine, in case there was some sort of an emergency, or they had to send an ambulance or a fire truck in there. There had to be, a way for those vehicles to safely get in and out, and not through a crush of people. Right. So that did change the way we approached the field. There was only one tractor road in. And we decided, since it was sort of kind of appropriate for a large vehicle, that we could send, we'd set that aside and have that be the access road. And then we sent the people through a trail that we blazed off to the right. But, with the tractor road we had was completely insufficient for a fire truck. So, and being, barely out of college kids, we just cobbled together. Like, we got more culverts, we got more rock from wherever, and we built ourselves, because the road had to go across a creek, so we had to put in a big culvert and rock and reinforce and make it a lot wider in order to get so we had to do stuff like that. But back to permits, we didn't have to get one. The town had no idea what to do with my, when I came in the door and I said, I'm having a big party and everybody's going to camp and there's going to be a band and they're going to play till, probably midnight or whenever they play till. And, there's going to be some noise and there's going to be a lot of cars. They're all going to be parked on my land. Do I need to, do you guys need to know? And they said, we don't know. We don't know if we need to know. No one's ever asked that before. And it probably took them 3 weeks or 4 weeks maybe to get back to me. And what they said was, we don't have any mass gathering ordinance. We don't have it on the books, but these are the things you need for safety.
Cool.
So that's what we did.
That's amazing. Amy, can I just ask, it sounds like you sound pretty chill about it at this point, looking back, but like, was it like a full-time job for a couple months, like actually getting this going? Because
No.
just build some culverts and get some rock and build some bridges. And, I mean, it sounds like, was it nerve-wracking getting it together?
No, it actually wasn't. I lived on my farm and I had a couple of roommates. One of my roommates was another young guy and he was a construction worker. He was a concrete guy. And he lived in one of the rooms in my farmhouse, and he was awesome, Tom Sheehan, and he helped a lot. Another guy, Chris Dyson, who was a friend of mine from Vermont, was living on the farm that summer, working for me, and Chris helped, a ton. And they were both liked the music. Chris was a big fan. He'd been to the Squam Lake Steakhouse and lots of other gigs, along the way, and. So they were motivated, and we all just did that on our, kind of on our weekends. Like, oh, we got to cut that, we got to blaze that trail, we got to, make sure it's mowed at the right time so that it's not too stubbly, and we got to build that road when we get to it. So we sort of, gathered materials. We had to cut down a bunch of trees to make the stage. We had to it required lumber. And nobody wanted to pay for it, so we were like just scrapping together lumber to build stuff. We literally just hodgepodge that stage together out of who knows what. But it wasn't. I'd built so much stuff on my stable, like miles of fence and horse stalls and big run-in sheds, that building a stage and doing a little bit of advancing was no big deal.
Nice. That's good. Yeah. I guess if you have an actual farm, you're used to doing stuff all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which makes sense.
We had a post hole digger on the tractor, and we could do these things. So
that's incredible. So we're going to keep talking with Amy. First, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if your investments reflected what matters most to you? At Green Future Wealth Management, the advisors specialize in helping clients manifest their values in their financial lives. Green Future Wealth Management was founded by certified financial planner practitioner and longtime fan Nick Cantrell, named by Forbes as one of the top next-gen wealth advisors in the country. Whether you are just getting started or have complex investing and financial planning needs, visit them on the web at greenfuturewealth.com. You can sign up for the email list or take the Investing Values quiz. When you feel ready, schedule a free virtual consultation. In appreciation for the amazing Phish community and the incredible work being done by fans across the country, Green Future Wealth Management will be donating 10% of asset management proceeds from new Osiris listener clients to Fans for Racial Equity. Just be sure to mention Osiris when booking your appointment. Create your green future. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc. Cambridge and Green Future Wealth are not affiliated.
And just like that, we're back from our break. We're talking with Amy Skelton. RJ, do you want to kick off this next segment?
Yeah. So Amy, you mentioned that we're going to get back to Amy's farm and talk about the show a little bit, but I guess, can you just tell us what happened in the early 92? That's when you started really working with the band and going on tour, right? So you kind of were connected, then disconnected, then reconnected, and you came back and started working with them. Yeah.
So in the spring of 92, I've still got my, my horse farm going, and, it's in Maine. So in the wintertime, it's cold and frozen, and there's, no lessons to teach because it's too cold. So there's downtime. There's like this period of time where you don't make a lot of money, and there's, just kind of holding pattern. So spring 92 comes around, and one of my friends came up. He said, hey, do you have any work for me? And I said, sure, I've got, we got to build this stuff. So come on up and you can build with me. And so he came, and I said, while we were building, he said he was saving money to go on tour because he was going out west to do the California tour. And I was like, I can't believe it. Like I'm paying you so you can buy a plane ticket, so you can fly out west and see the band. Like, this is so unfair. And I was thinking, and it wasn't unfair, but I was like so jealous. And so he came, he worked, he left. And then I'm at home and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm just going to go. And so I figured out how to cover and got my ticket and flew out, and, before cell phones and before, so the band doesn't know I'm coming, but I know that once I get there, I'll have a place to stay. Like, I'm confident that I can crash on, in the van or wherever they're staying. Like, I'm confident about that. Plus I have friends in the road. I don't, I'll see them when I get there because I can't reach them, but I know they're there. So I fly out to San Fran, and I went to those 92, that first 92 show. And so I ended up riding with the band vans and the truck for the rest of that tour up to Washington State, and doing, I don't know how long those gigs were. It was probably like a week maybe, or 6 or 7 or 8 shows or something. So yeah. Spent that whole time with a band or with my friends. Sometimes I would get off and like go hang with my friends for a couple of days, depending upon who was doing what. But during that time, the band is driving. There's 2 conversion bands and there's 4 crew, I think. So there's 8 people that have to move, plus the truck that have the truck full of gear. So, there's a couple of people that 3 people that have to drive every night. And then there's a bunch of, tons of work to do. And they only had exactly, they've just got the band and 4 crew, which was Paul, Toph, Brad, and Pete Shaw. Oh, and Andrew Fishbeck. So there's only the 5 of them doing everything, and they've all got specific jobs. So there was a whole bunch of things that needed to be done, like the jobs of a runner, really, or the jobs of a tour assistant. It's like, advancing things that we need at the next gig, or, arranging stuff. The band's van got broken into, and a bunch of, they lost some instruments, and there was now the van's got a big broken window. So, I called ahead and got like a custom window shipped to, like, I don't know, Oregon or something. And then got a, auto place to put the window in. So I arranged all of that, and I'm walking the Marmar, and, like, just everybody's helping out, and getting things done. And at the end of that, little stretch, they asked, do you want to come back on tour? And I said, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I gotta go back to the horse farm, but I'd had a ball. It was really fun. And, I'm like, oh, that was the best, working. I wasn't working. I was just, goofing off, but I had a great time. And then, that summer they asked if I wanted to do the fall tour, which began in November 92. And that's just around the time when riding lessons wind down. And that tour was going to go from November to May during that period of like snow and not much going on the farm. So at that point I had a full-time trainer on the farm living there, and she was excited to manage the place. So I went on tour for, in a working capacity for the first time in that fall, in that period.
Do you remember the music from that spring 92 tour? Because I remember some of the first tapes I got were like the 4/16/92 show from California, and then there's the Warfield and the Palo Alto and Santa Cruz. There's so many. These are like legendary
really
shows.
Yeah, they were really good shows.
Is there anything that, like, do you remember like seeing them? Because you'd seen them so much, and this is sort of a different environment, and really the first time that they got out to California. And like, do you remember the environment? Like, was it a lot of new people, or were people traveling to see them?
A lot of new people. There was definitely a lot more people than I was used to, sort of standing and watching. But everybody was, like, it was most people who ended up at a Phish show, it seemed like, got there for the right reasons. And most, I won't say all the time, but most of the time people had some vibe and groove who showed up at Phish shows and could dance, so even if they were slow to start and didn't get the music when it would first start, eventually a jam would plug in, and then they would plug in, and then the place would all be moving like it should. I do remember lots of people being introduced and just watching and absorbing. And I remember being extremely proud that, the band that I loved was in California playing these venues that I'd heard about and read about. And, I was pretty stoked.
There was a little tiny danger being in California, the Dead territory that like they were infringing on the territory, but it seemed like that turned out not to be an issue.
That turned out not to be an issue at all. Yeah.
Amy, we got a question from a listener when we said we were talking to you, and I guess when did you stop touring with the band, and how did that journey conclude?
I stopped really in '97. The band, or John Paluska, asked if I wanted to come and work in the office as the head of tour merchandising and wholesale merchandising, because that was a growing thing, like that needed somebody to take that on. And I'd been on the road for 5 years and a lot of shows. And I was touring with other bands in between Phish. So eventually, because of the way the touring was structured as the band grew from 92 to 97, they toured less and there was more time in between. So I ended up working for a big merchandising company and was doing these other tours. So I was on the road for like 10 months of the year, 4 or 5 years straight, like always at a show somewhere, except for in January and February. So when they asked me to take that role, I was excited to move back to be sitting still and enjoy my horses and enjoy, have chickens out my door and go to work and come home at the end of the day.
That's amazing. So you were part of this obviously during this period of intense growth and, amazing trajectory. I guess it's probably hard to summarize what that 5 or 6 years was like, but what is it like looking back on it at this point?
Oh my gosh. We started off like, playing, we were everywhere in the country. And so there were, we were going from like at the beginning, like clubs, which had like really small stages that were really hard to rig with sound and lights. And, there wasn't enough room for the gear, or there wasn't, there was compromises, between Kuroda and Paul, and, which today we've only got the opportunity to have these, the sound here or the lights there, which is it going to be? And so you'd have like all this tension in these small places on how to set it up and what takes precedence, lights or the best sound, and that was a tough decision, like night to night. And it would go like small, big, from one night to the next. It seemed like you'd be in a hockey arena and then back to a club in St. Louis or something. And then Texas, I remember playing in that. I don't remember the names of all these venues. I have to look at lists to remember. I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that place was. But like, there was one place in Texas with like a dirt floor and and like, really low, wooden stage. It's probably like a classic venue, and I have to look at the list to see which one. But there were just such a wide variety at the beginning, and then we started to just play all bigger venues. And we were learning so much. We went from having our very first tour bus and a truck to, several buses and a bunch of trucks. And we went from me being the production manager on my first tour to having, we had a couple different production managers during that time, and learned so much about tour management and production, and went from having this tiny crew to having, 40.
Yeah.
And it's just such growth and such a learning curve for everybody in the organization as we just figured all this stuff out.
And that was up to 1997.
Yeah.
But
and then it continued because I still worked in the office, and
right.
I was still I still remained the head of like tour merchandising through 2004 through Coventry. So I was still, out at a lot of shows, making sure everything was going well and keeping my finger on the pulse and, just being involved. So
that's really cool.
So much change.
Yeah.
And so many big gigs in between there, so many festivals.
So many festivals. I was going to say that's sort of like, and that to me is kind of when people say, what's the significance of this show? Why is Amy's Farm so famous? And what is the significance really? If you had to break it down, and it really kind of does. And I alluded to this in the beginning. It really sort of set the groundwork for how to do a festival. And Phish, of course, seemed with Clifford Ball to already know how, and it was like a combination of having been to a couple good ones of their own, and Bread and Puppet, in Vermont, and Amy's Farm, and boom, suddenly they were experts, and everyone learned from Phish how to do it. But would you agree that this was kind of like the beginning of all that?
I think so. I think it was the beginning of the realization that we could, that we could do this, and it planted a seed, and wasn't the beginning of the learning really, because my event was just really such a hodgepodge, born of love. But I think that it did plant the seed that it was possible to, find a space and do your own thing in your own way, and that would be special.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I just, before we wrap up, I just wanted to mention just a couple of the musical highlights. I mean, this is a 3-set show that, Amy, I don't know how clear your memories were of the music, but I'm sure you've listened back at some point. Have you listened back to it like over the years?
I have. This is going to sound really archaic, but I just was reconnected with my tape collection, which is awesome.
That's great. That's so good.
Like they just came back into my life, and I've been just starting to listen again. I mean, I've got tons of Phish, but I don't have like the shows that I listened to tons growing, as I came through my own Phish discovery. And I listened to Amy's Farm a zillion times after that show and through the years, but I haven't had it, I haven't had access to it. So it's only just recently that I've played it. Then that video came out a couple of years ago, which was really fun because there's people that I know, like, oh my God, there's a friend of mine who only dances like that, and like that's so funny, just seeing that stuff was funny.
I love the first set. I mean, there's so much music in here, but the first set, there's this kind of classic early 90s combo of Wilson, Foam, Runaway Jim at the beginning. And I love this. It's such a great combo. And the Foam is like this, it's just a good example of how much they evolved. Like that song is, I don't know, 3 years old at that point, but there's this like precision with the playing, but it's also, there's a lot of space, and same with the Runaway Jim. I feel like in the first 3 songs, you can just feel like how much this band is growing and how, I don't know, how dedicated they are to the craft, and it's really cool that you were able to host that. And that, hundreds and thousands of people have these tapes, and, now everyone can listen to it on the internet. But this helped turn a lot of people on, I think.
I agree. And it's like, if you're going to get one tape of this era, this is a good one, because it's kind of a smorgasbord of all their songs, because it was 3 sets, so they had to play a lot of their songs, and they every single one they played so well. I mean, they were obviously enthused, and the energy doesn't stop at all. And I know, RJ, that you mentioned Foam. Did you mention Foam?
He did.
Yes.
Yeah. Foam is one that's like in the jam charts or whatever. That's like one but Reba is another.
Yeah.
And I decided, all right, I got to go back and listen to Reba, even though I'd probably heard it 100 times. And there is something kind of special now that I think about it, and I was listening kind of critically about the way Trey's playing it. A strange sort of bendy guitar style that I don't know that he was really playing that much with even a year before. It was sort of something new that he introduced, a country bendy weird style, especially evident in that foam jam. The foam jam is only like 3 minutes long, but listen to that. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm. There was some country bendy stuff going on right around that era. They were definitely sampling some stuff and some more bluegrass and
Totally.
Yeah.
And I also just like it kind of, Amy, because of what you said about, a lot of my friends were there. I was not there, but like hearing, the dude and Sophie, who wasn't Paige's wife yet.
Right.
It was just Sophie Dilloff, come on for the extended encore. These are like my pals. And so I love it. It always brings back, it gives me a great feeling listening to this show.
Yeah. I played a little bit of it last night, and it was on the video. I pulled up that video, which I hadn't seen since when it first came out. I watched the whole thing a couple of times, then I hadn't seen it, and it was fun. Yeah. This
is amazing, Amy, and thank you for joining us and going back down memory lane. We might call on you later to talk about some more. Cool. Some more of your Phish experience.
Yeah, we might bring you back. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you, but I was going to say we might bring you back later this season. We're doing 47 shows or something like that, Amy.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Talking about the 90s. But thank you so very much for talking to us about this, amazing show. August 3rd, 1991, otherwise known as Amy's Farm. Everyone knows it. Check it out. And remember to review and subscribe wherever you listen or watch. On the next episode, we'll be stepping further forward into 1992 to talk about another step in Phish's career. So thank you, Amy. And until then, blaze on.
Osiris.